So tell us what got you interested in writing about online gambling?
I've always been a huge sports fan, and I just felt like I grew up with the assumption that sports betting was this horrible vice that would never be legalized in the US, something that ruined a World Series 100 years ago, and no sports want anything to do with it. And then about 6 years ago, in seemingly like a blink of an eye, it was everywhere. I was being inundated with ads. All my favorite teams had partnerships with these sportsbook operators. And I just wondered, how did, as a society, we go so suddenly from this is an evil vice to this is a harmless form of fun that we should embrace wholeheartedly?
Yeah, it's so interesting because you say like sports betting right away. And I know that that's one of the big components, but what are like all of the other things that fit under the umbrella term online gambling?
So, online gambling, in the simplest terms, is any type of game that forces you to risk money where you put some amount of money up, and if you lose or if you're not careful, that money is going to be gone. That can be betting on sports. It can be a game in an app where it's a little bit more blurry, but you're depositing money and the game finds a way to have you lose it or win it. It can be playing casino games like blackjack or poker on your phone or on the computer. It can obviously be just a straight up lottery, scratch off or a lottery game. There's a whole umbrella of things where they want to trick you basically into thinking if I put in some money, I'm going to win even more money. And it's overwhelmingly easier said than done.
How do you feel like these online gambling companies are messing with people psychologically, if you see it, and how?
The most fundamental one is setting expectations. Everyone knows, or hopefully everyone knows, it's really, really hard to make money over the long term in any form of gambling. That's why people are willing to take your bets or let you sit down at the card table or the slot machine. Whatever the case may be, it's kind of a rigged business. And I say rigged, that sounds illegal. As long as both sides know what they're getting themselves into, you could make the case that that's okay. But I think so many people, particularly with sports, because a lot of sports fans think they know everything, think they can outsmart some person in Las Vegas who's setting these odds. So you think, oh, I know my favorite team or I know my favorite sport. This is a chance for me to actually make money. I'm not exaggerating. 99.999% of people, they're only going to end up losing money. So I think those false set of expectations can be really dangerous.
I mean, when I think about like sports culture growing up, it was so different from what it's become today. And I imagine it's because online gambling has played a big role in that. Can you talk about that shift in sports culture and especially as it relates to college sports?
Yeah, definitely. It used to be you had to really look it out if you were interested. Like you had to know the right people or the right websites and be determined if you wanted to get down a wager. Now, I talk to so many people who want nothing to do with gambling, but it's just intertwined with like the experience of being a fan. You can't be a fan and not be bombarded with appeals to gamble. And that's the same, as you were saying, in pro sports as it is in college sports.
There's pressure everywhere if you go to a game, if you're a fan, if all your friends are fans. So how can you resist the urge to gamble?
That's a great question. It's hard, that's for sure. I would say the number one thing is there's a lot of new customer offers that you'll see, like sign up and get $500 in free bets or a deposit match or whatever the case may be. Just think about the fact that they're giving you that money on the front end because they know they'll make it back and then some on the back end. So be wary when you see those sign up offers because it's kind of like putting out bait on a fishing line and hoping someone's going to bite into it. Treat that with caution. The other thing is there's a whole variety of tools that are out there, tools that can help you moderate how much you're gambling. Like there's websites that block certain sites. One called Bet Blocker blocks thousands of gambling sites. So you can kind of have help resisting that urge to go gamble. And then if you get in more serious trouble, there's some more serious tools available like hotlines in every state for people who feel like they're headed down a dangerous path. So I'm happy to say that tools exist. It's really about knowing they exist and knowing how to find them.
And when it comes to deep trouble, like how do you recognize it in yourself or maybe even like a friend that you have that they might have a gambling addiction?
It's hard. Responsible gambling is betting within your means, risking money that you can afford to lose. Like if you lose 100% of whatever you're risking, you'll be completely fine, which is different for everyone, of course, depending on your circumstances, but it's a really important bar to set for yourself. Problem gambling is any type of gambling where you feel out of control. Doesn't matter how much you're betting or how often you're betting. If you can't be in total control of when you're doing it and to what degree you're doing it, then it becomes a problem. You might say, oh, if I'm not betting more than I can afford, I'm okay. If I'm not betting every day, I'm okay. Not necessarily. I think a lot of the useful advocacy groups have laid out more so like emotional criteria to think about how you're doing. Like in your passing thoughts, kind of have this itch to gamble whenever you're not gambling. Are you borrowing money from people or worse, stealing money to either pay off a debt or put in more money? Do you lose and then say to yourself, oh, I got to bet twice as much next time so I can make it back? These are these kind of, I see you're making a face.
Don't do that. Don't
yeah,
do
no,
that.
it's classic bad behavior, but it's so easy to fall into those traps. You tell yourself, I'm smarter than this, I'm more disciplined than this, and yet very quickly you can make those mistakes. So being able to see them, as you were saying, in yourself, but also in family and friends is really, really important.
How do you get help if you feel like you have an addiction or you're starting to notice signs of a potential addiction, either yourself or friends that you might be acquaintances with that you notice some of these behaviors? How do you get help?
So fortunately, there's all sorts of organizations that help you with that. NCPG is a really useful, memorable one to go search if you're looking for resources. 1-800-GAMBLER is this organization that operates a hotline that you can call. If you feel like you're experiencing a gambling crisis, they can direct you to the right resources. There's a variety of resources going up to the point of counseling, just like you might need a therapist for any number of mental health issues. This truly is a mental health issue. And I'm really glad that lawmakers, corporations, and health advocates are putting it in those terms.
Here are some vocabulary words from today's episode. Compulsive behavior. This is when you're not in control of what you're doing. For example, if you feel there's an itch for you to pull out your phone or you need to gamble, that's a compulsive behavior. Chasing losses. This is a common gambling behavior where you might try to win back money that you lost by gambling even more money. So, for example, if you made a bet and then you lost some money, you might think playing one more time might win you that money back. But that's not the right way to think about it because chasing losses could make you lose even more money. Gambler's fallacy. This is the belief that what has happened before will impact your odds of that same thing happening again in the future. So, for example, let's say you're playing a board game and you roll a dice. With the gambler's fallacy, it's the idea that if the past 10 times you rolled, it was always a 2, then that means there's more of a chance that the next time it's not going to be a 2 again, right? Wrong. The odds don't change, but for some reason we always think that it does. But no matter how many times you roll a 6-sided dice, you always get the same odds, 1 out of 6 chance. On today's episode, we learned a lot about sports betting and gambling apps, but there's also a lot of phone games that don't look obviously like they're gambling apps, but they actually do use some of the same tricks to manipulate us into spending more money. And they don't care how old you are. They actually even target teens specifically. So before we go, I really wanted to ask Danny about that.
There are some incredibly sneaky ways of slipping gambling into things that just look like a puzzle or a contest or a maze or whatever the case may be. Ways, I think a lot of us can see like a hand of poker and know, okay, this is gambling. But when we're just playing some game that we love on our phone and they're finding a way to have us put in money with the opportunity to win money, it's much more likely that we lose money. And then they're using techniques that casinos have honed for decades to make that game extra addictive and extra seductive. Those are just ways that gambling is infiltrating even the most simple and benign seeming games that we play on our phones all the time.
Yeah, I've even seen some on like kids games, like kids apps. Like some of my nieces and nephews are playing. I'm like, what is that? That looks like a gambling site. It's like, oh no, this is a kids game app. I'm like, what? This is wild.
Even like the in-game purchases on video games now. I know not all of that is like literally gambling, but I'm just so grateful when I was a kid that didn't exist. My parents would have been furious if I even asked for their credit card for in-app purchases, for sure.
Yeah, same.